that it initiated. There was a richness of artist-led spaces and kind of DIY activity and DIY spaces going on at the time. Area expanded and developed quite naturally into a collective due to the political climate at the time, the fact we were all friends out marching for causes that we believed in, and the studio is where 6 of us have a physical studio space, but the collective is where the group of artists that make things happen.
We would kind of, if someone had an idea, you would share it with the group and then everyone would come together and make it happen. Then that's when sort of local activist groups would start to approach us and ask us to give them a hand with visuals. But again, like, we are very much part of that community, so we're not working for people, it's kind of ourselves as well. And then for about 2 years there was a real push for political causes that we felt very strongly about. So the 2 main ones would have been the abortion law and marriage equality. Yeah, we didn't really see that as an artistic practice, it was more us out campaigning for our human rights really. But again, they're all campaigns that were quite personal to us, so we always felt like we were part of the communities that we're working with and for. You know, in Ireland, abortion and queer rights are quite, you know, shrouded in shame and secrecy, so it did feel quite important for us to be out really confidently and unashamedly kind of dressed up in these costumes and have a bit of crack about it. It was quite challenging, that period of just constant protest. Like, for a while it felt like we were out every week, sometimes more than that.
So for a number of those rallies, like, we've gone as Mother Ireland to International Women's Day, gone as a set of shooting gigs to Rally for Choice. There was a number of wedding cakes made for marriage equality.
I obviously am not from the north of Ireland, but moving over here kind of felt very much that, like, my rights had been changed. The strongest elements of working in Belfast is this interconnected nature of the arts community. Everyone's kind of in the same boat, so there's a real sharing. There's no real kind of hierarchy when it comes to kind of the larger kind of studio groups and smaller studio groups. We're very aware of the fact that, like, kind of people, activists, have been kind of working within the realms of kind of women's rights, LGBTQ rights, the Irish language, mental health for decades before we're just the next part of that story. I think that, you know, a lot of the kind of more mature activists kind of are wanting kind of more young people to kind of take up this and kind of push them forward.
We'd all kind of stick together to look after each other, to protest about the stuff that's really important to us and important to our kind of friends and community in the north, but also that we have the crack, and that's really, really important. If you think of any of the great social movements, they always needed really strong visuals, they always had artists as key to kind of that cultural and social change.
The reason you interject crack or fun into it is by way of reaching people and discussing really, really heavy stuff, playful. Yeah, I think it's also important to kind of consider that we're coming from a post-conflict society, and the North of Ireland and Ireland in general is, like, stereotypically almost, like, not a place where people discuss very difficult things openly. So to kind of take it to the street playfully and fun is kind of, it's very new. It's not done traditionally.
For the Turnprice 2021 exhibition, we have decided to kind of expand our practice that we have previously been working on with the shows, where we use folklore and pre-Christian characters to represent different identities in the north of Ireland, but kind of moving away from the typical narratives that you see in the news. We have looked at different identities, so queer identities, expats, we've also looked at characters such as the media and the police, and kind of created parody characters based on kind of folklore. So these characters use materials and use kind of imagery from folklore to represent modern day identities. So we created an event called Druid's Ball, and we invited friends of ours, artist friends and comrades and allies, to create their own characters. The event was based around the centenary of Ireland, so it's 100 years since the partition of Northern Ireland. In the kind of style of that celebration, that wake, that Irish pub tradition, we are going to translate that into show and commentary. It's our interpretation of the centenary, or what Northern Ireland means or doesn't mean. The Turnprice has been a really good way for Northern Irish practice and activism, and maybe changing narratives as well. For us, it's about sustaining this practice and sustaining our relationships with other arts organisations, other political organisations in Northern Ireland and the wider island of Ireland. People are able to come here and work in this space. It's a shared space, the door is open.
So that's a whistle-stop introduction to Array's work and the show at the Herbert in Coventry. I'm now going to pass you on to Naomi, who's going to talk about the work of Alliance for Choice and what has been done and needs to be done in the north of Ireland regarding abortion rights. And I'll be keeping an eye on the questions, so if you fancy any of those, stick them in the chat.
Thank you, Emma. Well, I know that there's some sort of familiar faces round the room, and some of you will be aware of what's currently going on with abortion rights, access and justice in Northern Ireland, but some people won't. So I do think it's important, just to go over, maybe give you a little potted history of Alliance for Choice in terms of where we've been, where we're at, and also where we're going. We're just going to try and run some of the pictures of activists and some of the images that we have used, and hopefully you'll be able to see those. Yeah, we're just going to run those in a little gallery rather than a presentation. So Alliance for Choice formed in 1996. And it was really formed on the basis that abortion was criminalised in Northern Ireland, and for the vast majority of women and pregnant people it was not available, and indeed if you tried to access abortion in Northern Ireland it would be a criminal matter, either if you did it yourself or you tried to assist anyone. In England, the 1967 Act sort of governed abortion, but that was never extended to Northern Ireland. So initially the campaign was in and around extending the 1967 Act, but that campaign then developed into the decriminalisation campaign, which is the most recent achievement in terms of abortion rights in Northern Ireland. So in October 2019, you will have seen, many of you will have seen in the news that abortion was indeed decriminalised, and that was really as a consequence of the Labour MP Stella Creasy bringing about an amendment in Westminster, which then translated into primary legislation in Northern Ireland. So at present, abortion is decriminalised. There is a framework for abortion in Northern Ireland, and that framework is guided very much by the United Nations Committee for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Not very catchy, but it's a UNCDAW committee for short, and it should be the framework on which abortion is provided for in Northern Ireland. But because it's Northern Ireland, there's always a big but, and that big but is the continued obstruction to abortion, which really comes in the form of the Democratic Unionist Party, or the DUP, the Traditional Unionist Voice, the TUV, and a number of individuals within parties at political level who continue to obstruct abortion services. The Health Minister in Northern Ireland is the person responsible for commissioning abortion services. However, since April 2020, when abortion was supposed to be provided for, that has not been realised. And on a personal, from a personal point of view, the Health Minister himself is anti-choice, and demonstrably so. And he has stated that he will not commission abortion services in Northern Ireland because it's a controversial matter. Now, it may well be a controversial matter, but in these circumstances we would regard that sort of application of controversy as a barrier and stigma of itself. So he has said that he will not commission services. So what that means in reality is that within health trusts, Northern Ireland has 5 health trusts, the medics and the professional healthcare workers in those trusts are free to provide abortion services if they so wish, but he will not commission them formally. So they will not be funded. There will be no public information provided about abortion services to women and pregnant people. And the full spectrum of abortion services that should be provided are not being provided for. So you can only get an abortion, a medical abortion, up to 10 weeks or 9 weeks, 6 days in Northern Ireland. And anything over that, you must travel. You must continue to travel to England. There is also one trust, the Western Health Trust, and it has stated because of resource issues and other issues, it can't provide abortion services any longer. So the women and pregnant people within that health trust are still forced to travel to England in order to access abortion services. Now, in Alliance for Choice, we don't believe in an abortion hierarchy. We believe that everyone who needs an abortion should have an abortion as early as possible and as late as necessary. However, the people who are now being forced to travel are usually later gestational limit abortions, and people with maybe more complex needs who require surgical abortions, and they are probably the people that should be travelling the least. Now, I should caveat that by saying no woman or pregnant person should be forced to travel. But someone with, for example, a severe fetal impairment, someone who requires a surgical abortion for particular reasons, someone who discovers that they are pregnant later on in their gestation and may have complex needs, they are the people that are being forced to travel. And the irony of all that is the premise in which the sort of sequence of court cases were taken were really based in and around those people. The people who shared their stories, the people who went public about what they were forced to do, whether that was reproductive coercion, they were forced to continue a pregnancy they didn't wish to continue, or they were denied abortion health care. They were the first people in and around 5 to 6 years ago who started to speak out. So people like Ashley Topley, people like Sarah Ewart, and they are the very people who, under the current Northern Ireland government, will be forced, will have to continue to travel. So that's a real travesty in and of itself. So in terms of what we're trying to do at present, we're trying to get services commissioned in order that every person who needs access has access. It should have been done long before now, but I think when decriminalisation came about in October 2019, I don't think any of us were naive enough to think that it was a done deal and that would be it over the line, because let's face it, we live in Northern Ireland and nothing is ever that straightforward. But I think we did, at this point, think that we would be in a different place, and that place is probably, once commissioning comes about, that place is looking at stigma and addressing stigma, and I think that's very much what the exhibition and the installation in the exhibition is in and around. So stigma is something which is which is present in abortion, not just in Northern Ireland, but internationally and globally. And really it comes in sort of 3 ways, or it presents to us certainly in 3 ways. And that's political stigma, so in and around the government, institutions, and the church, the hierarchy, and all of that. There is also environmental stigma. So that's societal stigma, stigma that comes from families, from friends, from circles that people move in society. And when we're speaking with women and pregnant people and dealing with women and pregnant people, what we find is that they have taken that stigma and they have internalized it. So they are applying that stigma to themselves. And one of the things that we try and address in Alliance for Choice is the pastoral care side of abortion. So we've set up just recently, it's to be launched actually in the next few weeks. We've set up an abortion doula service program and service, which is called Lucht Cabra, which means abortion fairy, and it's the Irish word for fairy. So what that does is it obviously provides practical help and support to women. Where do they go to get an abortion? What happens when you have an abortion? What you should expect? Is somebody to talk to? But it also provides that emotional and that sort of pastoral care that comes, with, seeking abortion healthcare, facing obstruction, facing barriers, and dealing with stigma. And we're also looking at sort of very controversial issues in and around abortion. I don't like using the word controversial, because it's something that those who want to, attack services, damage the legislation. It's a word that they use very often, and it's a tool they use in order to delay services. But we're looking at things like abortion and disability. We're looking at things like abortion and faith, abortion and LGBTQ issues, and those intersections where the oppression really resonates. And we are sort of working with groups where the intersections are common, but also the solutions to the stigma and ways of addressing the stigma can really be found, can be discussed and can be explored. And I think that's one of the things that has really opened up the creativity aspect of Alliance for Choice. So one of the game changers a few years ago was the Trust Women campaign, and the Trust Women campaign was an electoral campaign, in its infancy, and that was because, really, it took us by surprise, but abortion became a doorstep issue because there was a whole series of elections, a bit like there was in the UK, but I think there was even more in Northern Ireland. But what happened was women and pregnant people started to tell their stories. Initially, they probably did it anonymously through the work that My Body, My Choice had done, Leslie Hoggart, Fiona Bloomer, Emma and others. And women started to come forward. And once women started to come forward, it really resonated with people. It drove abortion away from being that real binary, right and wrong issue. It's either this or it's that. Women are either right or wrong. Women are either good for not having an abortion or bad for having an abortion. And I think that binary notion and that really sort of austere notion is something which is damaging when it comes to abortion healthcare. So I think that's the place that we have to take it away from. So what happened was people started to identify with people who had had abortions. So they started to say, well, actually it's not the stereotype. It's not the young promiscuous woman. This person could have been my mother. This person could have been my sister. This person could have been, my cousin, my friend. And I think that was something which was really pivotal in starting to break down the barriers and starting to break down the stigma. Because the reality is people's lives are nuanced. They're not simple. They're not straightforward. They're not, they're not black and white. They're not that binary notion of right and wrong, of almost good and evil. And I think art and creativity and culture was something that Alliance for Choice found was a real way of communicating those nuances. You can't do it. Rally and protest and meetings and all of the things that go with campaigning are really important, and they're integral to what we do. But I think there was a real discovery and a real outlet in terms of communicating the power of the story, the power of the narrative, who the person was behind the statistic, who the woman or pregnant people were behind the word travel or forced travel, what that actually meant. And I think the most powerful thing that someone said to me ever about abortion was, abortion is messy. It's messy. It's messy in a physical way. It's messy in an emotional way, and it's messy in a logistical way. And it very much was for women and pregnant people like myself and others who had to travel. But we had to take that mess and we had to push it inside, and we had to do it not just in the climate of silence, but also surrounded by this awful stigma. So it was about unpacking that messiness, and I think arts, culture, creativity, the plays that we've done, and all different sorts of, you know, installations, exhibitions, and most certainly the work that Nicola Irvine has done communicates that really powerfully and really, really well. So I think it's something that we have made a central tenet and a central pillar of our work, and it's something which has been hugely successful. And also, I mean, and this is a criticism of the anti-choice movement, that they really don't know what to do with that. So when you present something which is creative, when you present, for example, a person with a disability who is pro-choice, they don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to respond to it. And you're presenting the real picture. So I think that's something which will absolutely continue with our work. And also, as Emma has said, it's really good crack as well. It's a really, really good way to get it, because you are dealing with difficult issues, you are dealing with a heavy subject, you are dealing with all sorts of people, you know, at all sorts of points in their lives, and you have to find a way to make that not just relatable, but also, you know, for those of us that are active and involved in this, a way to make it doable. And I think art and creativity and culture is certainly that outlet. I'm going to stop now, because if you give me a microphone, I can talk like for hours and hours, especially if it's about abortion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Pam Lowe, and Pam is going to speak specifically about her area, which is anti-choice and on-street harassment and protest. I'm going to let you sit here, Pam. That's okay.
Sorry, I'm going to share the screen, but I just need to find the right one. Bear with me. Sorry, everybody. That's not it. Oh, it'll be in history. This one? This is
Yeah, this one.
Okay. Find it. You wouldn't think I've been doing Zoom presentations for a year and a half now. Okay.
Okay, I think we're just about. So while Emma just gets the slides up and running, I've just got a couple of things I want to say at the start. So firstly and importantly, I'll be using the term women all the way through this presentation, not because all abortion seekers are women, but just because, as will become plain, biological essentialism is key to what I'll be talking about. So for clarity's sake, that's how I'm using the term women. The other thing I want to say is I'm not an artist, so I apologise to all the artists in the room. The photographs are my own and are not great. But there you go, you'll just have to bear with me, but hopefully they will make sense to you. And the third thing I want to say is that one of the slides later on has some graphic images of abortion, so just be aware that that's coming up, and if you don't want to see that, yeah, maybe sort of, you know, look away and don't look at the presentation itself. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. So yes, so just to introduce myself, my name is Pam Lowe. I'm a senior lecturer at Aston University in Birmingham. I actually live in Coventry, so it's great that people have come to me. So this presentation arises from a 5-year longitude ethnographic project looking particularly around abortion debates in public spaces. We've been all over the UK, so we're taking a 4 nations approach. So we've been carrying out observations, doing formal and informal interviews outside abortion clinics, at demonstrations, other public events. We also look at signs, symbols, leaflets and public materials and public documents. We've looked at court transcripts as well, particularly in the debate around buffer zones. So buffer zones, for those of you who don't know, is areas outside an abortion service provider where there can be no protests, either anti-choice or pro-choice, around abortion. So we've been looking at those as well. If anyone's got any questions about the methods, I'd happily take them later, but I'll move on to the more interesting stuff. So just to give you a little bit of a background, so the vast majority of people in the UK accept or support abortion. It's about 90% of people think that abortion should be available in at least some circumstances, and about 70% think it should be just women's choice. So we pretty much are a pro-choice country, and it's not a controversial issue, actually. I would agree with Naomi on that. So the anti-abortion activists, the anti-choice activists, are a very tiny minority of the population, but they are very active, and also they punch above their weight. Quite often they're given quite a lot of prominence in the media, particularly under the understanding that everything has to be balanced. But it is a very small minority. So in terms of England, Scotland and Wales, it's the majority of Catholic. It's round about 85% Catholic. That's of people who are involved in public demonstrations, obviously not necessarily private views. In Northern Ireland, it's much more balanced between Catholic and evangelicals, probably around 50-50, but as I say, these are approximate numbers. But again, it's important to say that these people do not represent their faith communities. Most people of faith, including Catholics, support or accept abortion, or believe it's not a conscience issue that they can make for other people. The other important thing to add to this is just, particularly in England, Scotland and Wales, public displays of religiosity, and I struggle to say that word, are largely seen out of place. We don't necessarily like public religion, so people who are publicly demonstrating against abortion are actually not necessarily seen in line with the way that we understand religion, which is as a private affair. Again, in Northern Ireland that is slightly different because of the history of conflict, but certainly, politicians in England, Scotland and Wales who talk about their own faith, obviously that's not necessarily seen as a bad thing, not necessarily seen as a good thing, but in Northern Ireland politicians are much more likely to talk about their faith commitment. But that's worth bearing in mind when we're talking about public acceptance. So, when we're thinking about the anti-choice movement, they are extremely religious, and they come from a very specific religious position, and they have essentialised understandings of women, and this is at the root of what they stand. So motherhood is sacralised. So women are mothers, right? There is no alternative to being a mother. You're either going to become a mother, you are a mother, or you should have become a mother but unfortunately couldn't. And it's the central role for women, it's the only role for women, and everything is about this understanding of motherhood. So alongside this idea that motherhood is central to womanhood, there's no separation between the two. This fits into a broader cultural understanding of maternal sacrifice, that we all think that women should always put their children first. As a nation, we still work on the basis that the mothers generally should put their children first, but this is kind of gone to ultra sacrifice for motherhood in terms of the anti-choice processes. So it's taken a cultural understanding but magnified it to a huge degree. So motherhood is really at the heart of their campaigns. So so if we look at how they understood motherhood. So when we're talking about them, that these are the sorts of things that they say to us, that abortion violates something basic in women's nature, that women are biologically, mentally and emotionally ready to bring life. Women are mothers, whether they want or not, they want to be. The other thing is that the children are always with them. So, I've known two people personally who've had encounters with their children since the abortion, and the children have forgiven them. So the idea is that these are children from the moment of conception, and you are not a mother from the moment of conception. Actually, you were always going to be a mother to that child. It is predestined. It's the heart of everything you do. And my favourite quote is, I've sat with them pro-choicers and they seem to love their children too. The idea that somehow if you support abortion, you're anti-motherhood is a bit of a dilemma, but it's because motherhood is so central to everything. Now, because motherhood is so central, regret is inevitable, right? So you can't possibly have an abortion without having some negative consequences, either through regret or trauma, or because it's going against your very nature, your very being. So a lot of what they're doing is, particularly outside clinics, but also in other campaigns, is they're actually trying to save mothers. They're trying to save women from a fate that they shouldn't necessarily want, and that they have been positioned as saving mothers from a culture that actually encourages women to act against their nature. So they talk a lot about abortion culture. Abortion culture is the way in which abortion is seen as a potentially natural thing to do in certain circumstances. So if you are not ready to be a mother, it's okay to have an abortion, and they think that the culture of that is just actually working against women's natures. And all abortion is also forced. It's either forced directly, so people are directly pressurised from partners, friends, family, or indirectly through this idea of the abortion culture. And so following this is that they have a lot of emphasis that what they're doing is actually education, and they're actually giving women the choice that the culture doesn't give them. So they spend a lot of time talking about, as you can see in here in this visual image, your abortion, your right to know. And this is the front of the leaflet. It's not untypical. And what they're claiming here is that the abortion culture and the abortion service providers specifically are misleading women about abortion. So there is a lot of emphasis on telling women about the harms of abortion because society covers it up. And also that abortion service providers are all financially motivated. They're not in it to help women, they're not even in it for healthcare. They're in it to make a profit, and they profit by providing abortions. I think at this place, if there's any doctors or healthcare professionals on the call, they'll be really kind of wondering where the money went to, because it's certainly not something that they necessarily receive. But a lot of the imagery that they use is particularly around this idea of saving mothers. So they can save mothers by giving them information, and giving them information that has been withheld back from them, and to tell them about the dangers of abortion. So women need to be awakened to the dangers of abortion. And one of the ways that they can do this in particular is showing images of motherhood. So as you can see the idea here, this is a sign taken, this one was in Glasgow, about the idea that, we choose life if we value motherhood. Well, we could choose abortion and still value motherhood. They're not opposites. But they do understand that abortion exploits women. So the idea is the exploitation comes directly from the service providers, but also indirectly because it's pushing women away from their natural way of being, and that is harmful to them. So alongside this emphasis on mothers, we also have the free-floating fetus. So I'm sure many of you will have seen these images. They crop up everywhere. So there's a lot of emphasis on the fetus, but then they're not necessarily as worried about the fetus in its own right. Quite often what they're trying to do by the images is actually making women see. And the idea is that if you see a fetus, it will awaken your maternal instinct. It will overcome the culture through seeing the image of the fetus. And so quite often comments were made like, if the womb was transparent, then no one would have an abortion. They are quite often convinced that women have abortions because they don't know what abortion is. And so if they see the fetus, then this will change their mind, which is why there's an awful lot of emphasis on scans. So there's a leaflet, for example, which was handed out in Manchester before there was a buffer zone put in place. And the leaflet, the first page of the leaflet just said, ask to see the scan. Ask to see the scan because, first of all, they are assuming that the abortion service provider will withhold that information, but anyone could always see the scan if they wanted to. It was entirely their choice. But also, if you saw the scan, you would suddenly waken to the point that you were pregnant and recognise the fetus and recognise yourself as a mother. So whilst they obviously want to save the babies, and that's important, but these images of the fetus are going beyond that. It's about awakening the maternal instinct. So you will know what abortion is through seeing a fetus, and that will change their mind because you will come to your realisation that you are a mother and that abortion is wrong. So when we come on to the graphic images, and this is the next slide, so look away now if you don't want to see them.
I'll give everybody a second or two. Okay.
Right, so just pause there just in case. So the graphic images of abortion are designed to go one step further at that. They are specifically idealised to bring a visceral reaction. People are supposed to be angry, people are supposed to be upset. And the idea is that everybody needs to recognise that this is what happens. And by showing these graphic images, we will see the reality of abortion and suddenly change our minds. So these are aimed not just at mothers, which the fetuses are more aimed at mothers, but these graphic images are aimed at society and challenging the abortion culture. So the idea again is that if we need to recognise this, what this is, and that this is the harm that people are doing. And the harm is not just to the specific fetus, the harm is to culture more generally. And alongside that, there is another offensive image, which I would like to apologise for, but I have to show it to really explain it. And this is the comparison to slavery. So there is a lot of emphasis in some of the campaigns, particularly from evangelicals, about comparing abortion to the Holocaust and to slavery, which is obviously extremely offensive. But the idea is that they have a specific motivation for doing that. They believe that social justice campaigns need images, and that the images can change people's minds. And the idea is that behind this is that, for example, in slavery, it was only when images of slaves came to be seen as people that slavery began to be challenged. And they argue that the same thing needs to happens to the fetus. So we need to see the suffering fetus to recognise the humanity, and it's that humanity that is going to change our names. It's important to recognise that these narratives of slavery are very much built on a white Christian saviour narrative. It completely overlooks the role of enslaved people in bringing about social change. But it feeds into this narrative about Christians as religious warriors. So if we go to the next slide. Right, there's no more graphic images, so that's fine. So just, if you looked away, you can look back now. So in particular, I want to draw your attention to the image on the right, I think it is, of the protectress of the unborn. So this image appears all over the place. It is a Catholic image, so it's more, obviously it's used for Catholic anti-abortion, but it does fit into a broad social narrative. So this is Our Lady of Guadalupe, and for those of you who don't know anything about religious iconography, and that was me when I started, I have to say, that this is an image of Mary, which was a vision that appeared in the area which is now Mexico. And it has particularly significance because she's actually she is pregnant, and you're supposed to be able to read her pregnancy in the image, which is again something I'm not quite able to do, but I will trust what other people have said about this image. So the reason that this is important is that the story of this particular image, or this apparition, was that it appeared just as Christianity was taking over this area. And in particular, Christianity was used as a challenge to the idea of child sacrifice. So when you are seeing this image, what you are doing is actually you are calling on Mary to intercede against child sacrifice through abortion. And that is how she's arisen as the protectress of the unborn. Interestingly, actually in South America, this image has a completely different meaning. And the meaning in terms of abortion is much less well used. And again, I think this is really important to recognise that images don't necessarily always carry the same meaning everywhere, but this is what it means for the anti-choice people. And alongside that image, this is not untypical of the sort of person you might see outside an abortion clinic. You can't quite make it out, but if you can see the brooch, the brooch is actually Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then also you can see the rosary beads, and you can see that she's got a particular card that has a religious meaning. So the religious iconography is there for a particular reason. And to say these are Catholic symbols, but they are really about both challenging the idea of abortion through calling on religious intercession, so calling on the saints or calling on God to change people's minds, but also, and importantly, a way of protecting yourself from the evil of abortion. So this is where people are actually that they are doing God's work, but they're doing God's work in a way that they need to be protected themselves. So you can see this more generally on the next slide, where there are more images like this. So again, you can see this particular group of people were outside a clinic in East London. And the religious iconography is there. You can see, obviously, that they're all kneeling in prayer. But although this is Catholic imagery, the idea of child sacrifice actually comes into the evangelical understanding. So this is the card at the bottom, "You shall not murder." This was given out by an evangelical group actually in Birmingham. And again, it was specifically about the idea of abortion being child sacrifice. But it's important to work so regardless of whether you are Catholic or from an evangelical community, the idea behind these things is that you're actually doing God's work in doing this work, and you're almost trying to ensure your own place in heaven by actually involving yourself in the mission. And quite often, particularly for people who have previously had abortions and then come to Christianity or rediscovered your Christianity, you can actually make up for your previous sin by being involved in the anti-choice movement. So by calling on the intercession, by using these religious images, they're sending a wider message about understandings of abortion, but it also means that they're actually reminding themselves that this is God's work and this is what they've been called to do. So these images have a dual purpose. So so to just sort of sum up, because I've probably talked for too long now, but
You're fine.
so coming back to the images of abortion is normal, which was seen as so challenging in the context of Northern Ireland. So if you understand the way that they understand abortionist knowledge is threatening their worldview. It's threatening the very heart of their understanding of religion, of traditional values about men and women, because if abortion is normal and motherhood is optional for women, then the whole root of their understanding of how the world operates is challenged. And I think that is why, I've not asked them, but that is why I think that those particular signs were seen as so challenging. So the traditional religious understandings really shape their position on abortion, and it can be seen in their choice of images. The images represent their beliefs that women are mothers, and the images of the fetus will help them recognise their motherhood or recognise abortion as evil in terms of the graphic images. And the religious iconography actually reasserts this message, but it also supports their understanding of divine intercession and the constant battle between good and evil in which they situate abortion.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Pam. And I also have to say that no matter where I've been in the world for abortion conferences, Pam always manages to find the abortion protesters that seem, whether it's a van crawling around the street or she's monitoring how many people have attended a protest.
Everyone else runs away.
Yeah. So we have a bit of time now for questions. I'll stop sharing the screen so that we can all see each other. And I'll make this bigger. So either you can put something in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, we've got plenty of time now for any questions. I can see some people in the room who I'm sure would be absolutely busting to say something. And if not, I noticed that Naomi was writing some notes there, so maybe you want to have a little contribution in the meantime.
I was just actually writing some notes on what Pam was saying, and the stuff in and around the religious iconography. One of the things that we're doing is, and you're going to see a little bit of it later on, is an abortion and faith project, which involves a couple of incredible activists from Northern Ireland and academics, Fiona Bloomer and Kelly Turtle, who might be on. Oh yeah, I can see Fiona there. Kelly might be on as well. But really what that is looking at is as the people involved in that project call it, the decolonisation of faith, and really changing faith narratives and changing that space, because the reality is people of faith have abortions, people of faith are pro-choice, but that is very much sort of drowned out by the very loud and far from secular society that reaches the sort of highest levels of government in Northern Ireland, because the First Minister Paul Givan is vehemently anti-choice and is actually he's actually positioned a private members bill in order to wreak havoc with the legislation that we have, even though it isn't properly implemented yet. So yeah, that the religious sort of element in Northern Ireland is very, very present and problematic. But just to say, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. You know, we are working on abortion and faith, and it's really refreshing to have some people of faith who have a different perspective and are speaking out. Look, we'll take some questions there. Is there anyone who wants to go first? I know you're not shy.
Hi, can I go first?
Fiona Bloomer.
Yeah. I just wanted to say,
I think you have to be unmuted at our end, Fiona.
Okay.
No, we can't hear you.
Okay.
Try now.
Right, can you hear me now?
Do you want to try again?
Everybody at home can hear, Fiona.
Okay.
Just we can't.
We can't hear you, Fiona.
Okay.
Do you want to maybe pop it in the chat box?
I'll pop it in the chat.
Read the question out.
Sure. Okay. I need to think now how I'm going to write it.
I wonder how.
Hang on. Okay. So I want to reflect.
Hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay. I just wanted to reflect on, I suppose, how the use of art has brought this completely different dimension to activism in Northern Ireland. I mean, I've been involved in Lands for Choice since 2010, and not a creative person at all. You know, so when Emma came along initially and, you know, brought all her creativity and that expertise to it, and it just brought this really different dimension, as well as the solidarity, I suppose, from, you know, the arts community. But it really brought a lightness and a colour, you know, and crack. You know, it was just that sense of, I mean, particularly in those early years of activism from 2010 onwards, we felt as if we were continually being subject to bad news all the time, and the stigma was really heavy. And even, you know, being public about being an activist. You know, you were continually worried about who was observing you. So for moments to come light, you know, and positive and joyous, it was just amazing. So it was lovely looking back on all those images and reflecting on that.
Thank you, Fiona. And just maybe something to add to that. I think the reach that the creative work has had has extended far beyond, you know, anything you could do maybe at a meeting or a protest at a rally, because there are certain people who just won't attend those things. But when they come to a play and, you know, an art exhibition, you know, even if it's a market, you know, whatever the artistic space is, and you reach people that otherwise you wouldn't be able to reach. I'll maybe let Emma comment on that.
I mean, I'm going to talk about it later after we have a break after lunch, but I think there's something about building community through creative practice that I think is really important, because you know, you couldn't sustain activism if you were only doing the struggle and the fight the whole time, you know, or if you're only doing that element. And also I think sometimes we have to make not concessions, but the way we have to talk about it is framed by someone else. So it's framed by a government's consultation, or it's framed by the law as it already exists. But when you try and do creative projects, you can create your own framework and your own kind of narrative, and you're kind of setting the terms for how you talk about it in a way that you quite often can't when you're responding to government legislation or a court case, for instance. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take another question or comment.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, can you say it there?
Is this it's Paula Blair. Hi, Paula. Is this an area where freedom of religion or freedom of expression causing harm can prompt a review of policies? How can we work towards separation of state and religion in the UK? Because abortion is only one area where other rights are infringed by acts of Christian terrorism. So I'm going to pass that to Pam first.
So at this point, I'd like to point out I'm not an academic lawyer, and I apologise if I know. That's why I always have to apologise for things I don't know. So I can't speak more generally, but certainly there was the first buffer zone that was introduced in Ealing. There was a challenge by the anti-choice, specifically on the basis that removing protests from outside abortion clinic was infringing freedom of religion and freedom of expression. And my very lay understanding of the judgment is that freedom of religion is a freedom to practice your religion in private. You don't necessarily have the same rights to in terms of public space. It's a balancing of rights. So in the case of that particular case, the rights of women for privacy over their family life, for example, was seen as more important, and to give a reasonable restriction to the freedom of expression and freedom of religion. But I absolutely agree. I know, obviously, in England, we don't necessarily have exactly the same issues as in the north of Ireland. However, yeah, the non-separation of church and state is still, amazes to me to the extent that we still have it. I mean, I know the House of Lords is an internal embarrassment anyway, but then we have bishops in the House of Lords that makes it even worse. So I do think we do need to look at this. We do need to look at the place of religion and the way that we think about religion in terms of the operation of the state. So yeah.
And I think the other thing as well is people who consider themselves secular people in the UK and Ireland, and we have a right to be free from religion as well. So it's not just freedom to express and practice your religion, there's also a freedom to be free from other people's religion as well, that isn't kind of flagged up quite as often, I suppose. But I do sometimes think about the difference is that we don't think we're on a mission from God. I mean, I don't, but maybe. But I think sometimes it can be really difficult to tackle this kind of belief that they're, as Pam said, on a mission that's going to save themselves a place in heaven, or that they you know, if someone really genuinely believes that they're saving women's lives or saving baby lives, then it's a very hard thing to tackle. But also we have to remember, as Pam said, they're not the majority voice. They just get amplified really unnecessarily and really far above their weight in terms of public opinion, I suppose.
Yeah, just maybe want to add something to that. I think we have to remember that religious oppression and bigotry is still oppression and bigotry. You know, because religion comes before it, it doesn't mean that it isn't harmful. But what I would say is one of the things that we have to look out for is this kind of subversion of, and Pam has touched on it in her presentation, subversion of things like slavery, you know, like Black Lives Matter. We have an organisation in Northern Ireland who are evangelical anti-choice, and they are called Both Lives Matter. And we also have sort of religious organisations presenting as feminist, for example, you know, presenting as, you know, supporting of, you know, movements like suffragettes, and that, you know, they compare, they'll regularly troll us and send us pictures of, you know, Birkenau and Nazi camps and things like that. And I don't think that you can really rationalise that sort of fundamentalism and that behaviour, and it is religious fundamentalism, you know, that we're talking about here. And one of the things that the media needs to do is to recognise that we are not the flip side of that fundamentalism. We are not the counterweight to precious life or Both Lives Matter, because we are not fundamentalists. And at the heart of that sort of religious fundamentalism, for me, is an absolute narcissism about saving themselves and about, you know, not only having their own opinion, but owning everyone else's opinion as well. So I think we have to, I don't think we can ignore it. I mean, there are people who will take the view that you have to ignore the anti-choice lobby and not fundamentalism. It's hard to know what to do with it, but I don't think we can ignore it, because there are people out there who are damaged by it. It's all right for those of us who are activists, you know, we're robust enough about it, but it can be hard for us too. But there are women and pregnant people out there who are being subjected to it, and it is damaging. Take another question.
Yeah. If there's no other questions, I'll just add to that. I think the fact is that seeing this as a religious practice is both offers you know, downsides but also opportunities, right? So the opportunity is if we recognise being against abortion as a religious practice, as a religious belief, which people are entitled to hold. I'm not going to police other people's religious beliefs, but actually recognising and saying, well, this is your religious belief, but it doesn't apply to the rest of us, and therefore it cannot be the basis of law or regulation. It's interesting, so, I mean, the numbers vary, but it's about 50% of people in England, Scotland and Wales now have no belief. So actually, saying that they're no belief doesn't mean to say they don't have any beliefs. It's a bit complicated sociologically, because they could believe in spirituality, but they're not necessarily following something that they would identify as a religion. But actually, it's becoming clear that actually people of no belief, however, is actually becoming the majority. So the extent to which people with belief can actually and not just put their views on people no belief, but actually, as you say, put their views on people who are of their faith but don't hold the same position. And I think so. As I say, it is a challenge because you don't want to challenge people's faith position because they're entitled to it. But it also gives us an opportunity, I think, to say, no, well, this is your faith position. You are welcome to it, but you can't apply it to everybody else.
And following on from Pam's point, I think the reason that gets so tricky in the north in Ireland is because we have people who are in government leadership positions who have very fundamental Christian beliefs, and they haven't been voted in because of their Christian beliefs. They've been voted in because of their national identity. So they're voted in because they believe they're either British or they believe they're Irish. And although the religious identity is entangled with that, Northern Ireland has become more and more secular as well. It's not 50% that don't have a belief, but it's creeping towards that. People don't want to have majority faith-run schools. People want no faith education, but unfortunately, because of the entanglement of religious views and national identity, we end up with these really fundamentalist people like Paul Given in power. A party for which a percentage of whom do not believe in dinosaurs. And when they congratulated the very first woman First Minister, brought up her role as a mother and her role as a wife before her role as a politician, whether or not you agree with her politics, which we don't. But so I think it's interesting because on the ground, amongst the general population in Northern Ireland, our social views are in alignment with the rest of Ireland and with most of the UK, but because of the post-conflict nature of Northern Ireland and this kind of forced coalition, we end up with a misrepresentation, I suppose. So it's like this, we're not represented on social issues, we're only represented by national identity, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, 63% of people who voted yes for repeal identified as Catholic.
Yeah.
In the south of Ireland, so that just shows you the complexities of the picture.
Do we have any other questions? We've got a few new people have joined us. Hello, new people. We are happy to take any questions on chat as well. I spot a few familiar people from activism. Let me see. And if people want, we could probably have a little early break and come back.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Unless anyone has any comments.
Unless anybody's got any more.
You're welcome to.
Yeah, even if you just want to chat or say hello. So it's 12:15 now. So if we come back at we're going to give everybody a lunch break, so sorry for anybody that's just joined. But if you want to come back at 1:15, and Nicola here will be swapping over with Pam. Sorry, Pam wants to say something.
I was just going to say, if this has been advertised, because people might be running to this timetable.
Oh, right. Okay, so we'll still come back at 1:30 then?
Just in case.
Just in case. All right, so you get a longer break, and we'll see everybody back at 1:30. I'll leave the Zoom open just in case people want to have it on in the background or might have problems joining in again. But thanks so much for already joining us.
Nicola's work on the screen, so I'll hand over to Nicola.
Hi everyone. Oh, we get the...
Sorry, move this out of the way.
I just...
Yeah.
Okay, so hi, I'm Nicola Irving and I'm an illustrator animator based in Belfast, which means I make pretty pictures and I make pretty moving pictures. So that's gonna move? It's not gonna move? My work focuses on non-conventional canons of beauty blurring gender stereotypes, and creating characters with an emphasis on personality and individuality. Today I'm here to talk to you all about my work with Alliance for Choice. When Alliance for Choice first contacted me about working for them, I was super excited as they represent everything I stand for. This was my face when I heard about it. I've always been interested in creating art that has an impact on the world around me. Previously doing work for such topics as domestic violence and climate change. However, I'm not going to lie if I said I wasn't worried for a second about the implications of working on such a political issue, especially in Northern Ireland. I hadn't done anything political before, and starting with such a conflicting issue was a bit scary as a growing illustrator. However, I will always want to stick by my views and make a positive change with my work. So when Alliance for Choice first contacted me, it was to work on 3 animations. The ideas and the words behind the animations were created in a workshop hosted by Alliance for Choice. The first being how all sorts of people need abortions and calling for abortion access for everyone who needs it. The visuals behind the first animation were to have a storybook, one of those storybooks that are split up into 3 sections. The idea was that I would represent a different character, showing people with disabilities, different gender presentations, and queer people. I wanted the characters in the animation to be inclusive not only gender presentation-wise, but non-conforming to mainstream beauty standards. So in the second animation, I discussed the access to contraception and sex-positive education. The animation would be black and white at the beginning with a person smashing open a tampon condom machine, revealing a sex-positive garden full of sex-positive themed words. While creating the animations, I wanted them to be brightly coloured. I wanted them to feel happy. Abortion is not a sad topic and should not be represented as a sad topic. The feel I wanted to evoke with these animations was a feeling of calm and inclusivity.
No, I wasn't so even sorry for it.
Yeah, that's the garden with the words. Do I press play or? The third animation was to talk about the idea of parenthood and how it's a choice, not an obligation. The visual behind the animation is 2 men talking about how one doesn't want children and the other trying to convince him that he will change his mind. I tried to keep the men in the animation looking quite masculine because I feel as though we never see manly men talking about issues surrounding parenthood, emotion, and contraception. It's nice to see men talking about their emotions in such a positive way. So that's the 2 men there. Overall, I feel I achieved a positive, inclusive feeling. The animations got such a positive response, however, the billboards I created didn't get such a positive response. The ideas we have for the billboards was to have the characters and slogans from the Who Gets to Choose animation. I made these characters purposely strong and powerful looking, and having them in unapologetically strong stances. I found it funny how one of the anti-choicers said on Twitter that my illustrations' long legs were manipulating women into believing that having an abortion will keep them staying youthful and beautiful. This was kind of contradictory, seeing people as primarily sexual objects and everything we do is to appeal to the male gaze, whether that be having an abortion or not. The whole reason we created these billboards and are advocating pro-choice is because it's our body, our choice. We are not appealing to anyone's standards but our own. The real reason the legs are long in my illustration are to exaggerate the strong stance in the character. The idea of strength, and nothing says strong more than standing up for your own rights. I made the background, don't have it up. That's the one with the long legs. Yeah. I made the backgrounds of the billboards bright pink to reinforce that this should not be something to be ashamed of. Abortion is healthcare, and the bright pink happy colour is in your face and you can't miss it. The pink says we are unapologetically here. When I was first told about the billboard concept, I did expect them to be ripped down, but I didn't expect them to be ripped down quite as fast as they did. I went to go see one in Belfast City Centre the day it was put up, but the billboard was ripped down already, and I got tagged on Twitter from the anti-choicers. It made me think, what was it about the billboards that angered so many people? Was it the words, was it the images, or was it the fact that it was on a billboard? Does the idea make people uncomfortable? The animations I did in the past got nowhere near as much hate as the billboards, but had much more content. But maybe that was because they stayed in the pro-choice circle. Do we have to make people uncomfortable to make them wake up? Artist protest has been around for forever, with more recently Robert E. Lee's statue for the Black Lives Matter protest, to Keith Haring with his AIDS activism work in the 1980s. I think when art is used as a form of protest, it can provide a long-lasting visual impact, and I think we can see this with the billboards and the fact that we're talking about them now. The hate that was received from having the billboards up and torn down benefited us. Those torn down billboards served as a reminder to all of us how behind we are, and how, even though the abortion law has passed, we still have a long way to go. The fact that the billboards got people talking about the issue, and the fact that they were so controversial, give us so much more of an audience. The reach the billboards got and the amount of positive feedback was amazing. However, I can't say that I wasn't just a little overwhelmed. I wasn't expecting that many eyes on my work, and although it was a little scary, it was overall good. The whole experience changed how I view my work, and in a way, the hate was good because it made me feel like I was helping fight for something. I think now I try with my work to create art that has a positive impact, and art that evokes a response, because now I realise how valuable my work can really be. Thank you.
We're gonna now show the video now. So we're just going to show a piece of Nicola's work, which was made for Faith Voices for Reproductive Justice, and it's called "Who Gets to Choose." So we're going to
do the other one straight after.
Yeah, and we'll show you the other work straight after. So sit back and enjoy.
Comes from Christian churches and organisations. But people of faith don't see ourselves in those loudest voices. Most of us recognise it's complicated. We've just never had the space to talk about it.
I thought it was someone else's debate and I should keep a respectful silence. But really, I just didn't want the controversy of talking about the issue as a Christian leader.
I've had an abortion, and every conversation with my faith community has been the same. Just people telling me I've done a terrible thing and needed forgiveness. But that never really felt right to me.
There are very loud voices on abortion in our churches. I needed space to think and learn for myself before others decided my position for me.
Faith Voices for Reproductive Justice is a space to explore a more compassionate response to abortion. We support, challenge and learn from each other as we fight abortion.
Sorry, I've just seen that people can't see the video.
Yeah, I think we're just going to fix that and start the video again. Can you only hear the sound? Yeah.
That's annoying.
In Northern Ireland, it can seem like the main opposition to reproductive rights
We're just going to try again because I don't know what else to do except stop and start again. Let's try again.
If someone can just flag with us if they can see it or not.
Can people see it? Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks.
The mysteries of technology, okay.
In Northern Ireland, it can seem like the main opposition to reproductive rights comes from Christian churches and organisations. But people of faith don't see ourselves in those loudest voices. Most of us recognise it's complicated. We've just never had the space to talk about it.
I thought it was someone else's debate and I should keep a respectful silence. But really, I just didn't want the controversy of talking about the issue as a Christian leader.
I've had an abortion and every conversation with my faith community has been the same. Just people telling me I've done a terrible thing and needed forgiveness. But that never really felt right to me.
There are very loud voices on abortion in our churches. I needed space to think and learn for myself before others decided my position for me.
Faith Voices for Reproductive Justice is a space to explore a more compassionate response to abortion. We support, challenge and learn from each other as we fight abortion stigma in our faith communities.
I'm on a journey and still learning along the way, but now at least my faith and my thinking has space to breathe and I'm finding my own voice.
I'd always felt pressure to be against abortion, but reproductive justice is something I can be for, something that is totally in keeping with the values at the heart of my faith. How dare we shame people who are doing the best they can in an unjust world?
This is somewhere I can bring my abortion story as part of my journey with God and find acceptance and understanding. That makes me feel like I can breathe through it.
I believe that everyone's story is different and we are called to journey with people. My role is to provide love and safety, not judgment or shame.
Okay, so that was the Faith Voices film, and that's part of an ongoing project which involves Faith Voices for Reproductive Justice, which is a group of faith leaders and people from different denominations across Northern Ireland who have got together to talk about abortion, the role that faith has to play in abortion, and really sort of come together as a safe space and a brave space as well for people in faith communities who have had abortions, and for people who, as one of the narrators says, are on a journey when it comes to abortion. And I think it's a real critical piece of work. One of the things that we can't do is sort of follow the binary narrative of the anti-choice lobby and simply say faith has no role in abortion, because the reality is many people of faith have abortions and many people who are pro-choice have faith as well. So I think it's something that we absolutely have to recognise. I think the important thing is that Nicola's particular style of animation is not only beautiful, but it also captures everything that we have talked about today. It's gentle, but it's strong. It's positive, but it's also nuanced. And it's a real round piece of work. And I think once we sort of saw that style of animation, that was something which really resonated with us. And I think it captures it so well. What we're going to do now is show another piece of Nicola's work, which is Who Gets to Choose, which was brought together by a group. The ideas were brought together by a group of activists, Alliance for Choice activists, as Nicola has explained. So we'll show you those three pieces too.
Alliance for Choice is a grassroots organisation campaigning for abortion rights. We have teamed up with Rosa UK to look at the wider impact gender inequality has and how it affects everyone regardless of their gender or background, especially when it comes to reproductive justice and non-judgmental sex education. If you want more information or need support with an abortion, go to
Oh, I'm not resting that one again.
Alliance for Choice is a grassroots organisation campaigning for abortion rights. We have teamed up with Rosa UK to look at the wider impact gender inequality has and how it affects everyone regardless of their gender or background, especially when it comes to reproductive justice and non-judgmental sex education. If you want more information or need support with an abortion, go to Alliance for Choice is a grassroots organisation campaigning for abortion access in Illinois. We have teamed up with Rosa UK to show how gender inequality affects everyone regardless of their background or circumstances, especially when it comes to reproductive justice. If you want more information or need support with an abortion, go to
okay, and all of the videos are available if you wish to share them across social media. Just maybe two little points of clarification on the videos. The first is that we don't have telemedicine in Northern Ireland. When the pandemic came about in early April 2020, there was no abortion provision, even though there had been decriminalisation. And in the rest of the UK and in Ireland, telemedicine was brought in, but it has been resisted in Northern Ireland politically, and telemedicine is not available. The other thing is, Nicola was referring to the billboards, but just for people who aren't aware, following the creation of the animation, we were so struck by it that we wanted to do more with it. We wanted to do a billboard campaign for a long time in and around abortion, and we thought this was a really good way to do it using the animation. So we crowdfunded, and we raised money, and the billboards were displayed across Northern Ireland. But we weren't surprised when they were damaged, but as Nicola has said, I think the speed with which that happened, and the sort of viciousness online in terms of a response to it was quite unsettling. But I think what it really exposes, and what really was troublesome for the anti-choice lobby, was the fact that it gets to the absolute heart of stigma, and it's because the billboards were so public and so visually engaging that it was something that they couldn't cope with. And also the figures in the billboards that Nicola animated so beautifully were also representations of real people, not the people that the anti-choicers present. In fact, they don't present, they usually just present pictures of a fetus. But for example, in one of them there was a person of colour in a wheelchair who was stating all sorts of people need abortions. That really, really troubled the anti-choicers. It really, really troubled them. So much so that they accused us of eugenics, which is something that we're obviously used to, but also racism. The fact that this person was stating all types of people need abortions. I'm a person with a disability. I'm pro-choice. And I may or may not need an abortion, was something that they simply could not manage. And I think because of that, I think we have to do more of that. We have to have more of those conversation starters, and we have to bring that type of discussion into public discourse if we're ever going to destigmatise it. Look, I'm just going to hand over now to who the key speaker of the day, who is Emma Campbell. Emma needs no introduction for those of you who know her. For anybody who's joined the session, Emma is the fellow co-convener at Alliance for Choice, and is also doing a PhD in photography, which is whether photography has a role to play in abortion rights in Northern Ireland. And Emma is of course a long-time campaigner on reproductive justice issues.
And of course, I can't find my own presentation to share now. Obviously. Okay, so bear with me for a second. I'm just going to have to go into my history here. So I think something else that probably people don't realise is the Billboard company, the advertising company who provided the billboards for us, got so many calls and so many abusive messages to their staff that they had to get in legal advice, and they withdrew the campaign partly out of safety concern for their staff, but they also refunded us all of the money, and with that we were able to print loads of these which are now available on our website, and we've got bags and we've got jumpers, because we figured if they won't let us put it on billboards, then we'll just make ourselves billboards again, like we had to so many times before. Okay, I've found my presentation now. And less of a plug. So I don't often get a chance to show the both sides of my work at the same time. Normally I have to wear one hat or another. So I'm actually delighted today that I get to do both. You've already seen these ones, so. All right, so this is, let's say, like a whistle-stop tour through some of my PhD work. And I'm more than happy to take any questions, or if anybody wants to get me to stop and explain anything, I'm more than happy for that as well. So really, and I can see Anne Rossiter here, who's part of the reason that I've become so, as a French interviewer the other day said, militant about this. But I want to illustrate how art is a tool for disrupting stigmatizing discourse around abortion, and how it really becomes a movement building exercise for Alliance for Choice. So we don't have enough time to discuss the many different protests and workshop aspects that Array and Alliance for Choice work together on as an ongoing collaborative process, because it in itself could be a book, as Fiona Blimmer has told me. So instead, the focus is going to be quite laser focused on a couple of examples of the formalised visual arts that had explicit collaboration with Alliance for Choice in one way or another. So that's some placard making, because there were 28 placards made there, because at the time there were 28 women a week travelling to England for an abortion. So the 4 pieces of work I'm going to try and give a very quick overview of, and all of them apart from the Drobes Ball are online on my website and Array's website. And the Drobes Ball, you saw a little snapshot of the film there, and also you can come to Coventry and see it. So when they put their hands out like scales, an appropriate hobby as others say us, and the Drobes Ball, and all of it I'm going to frame as socially engaged art, which is a kind of nebulous but significant categorization of art that talks about public discourse with a particular social issue through engaged or dialogical practice. So what socially engaged art creates is emancipated, that is, we hope that its participants walk away feeling enriched, and perhaps even claiming some ownership of the experience or the ability to reproduce it with others. And I actually think Nicola's work is a really good example of it, because the videos weren't just made by either, it wasn't just an idea me and Naomi had or an idea Nicola had, but we had workshops before every single one where there were activists and directly affected people who came up with the language, who came up with the storyboarding, and then they feel a certain part of ownership over the work in the end. We'll come to talk about those butterflies that you can see. So like other aspects of grassroots organising, the arts and creative actions aren't isolated, independent strands of action. We'll go back to this one, but an interdependent thread running through a rich tapestry of overall movement building towards bodily autonomy. I'm going to mention, I didn't have time to get examples of all their work, but other key artists in the movement in Ireland have been, speaking of Imelda, Anne is a member, Mazer, Jessie Jones and Sarah Brown, Siobhan Clancy, Homework, All the Repeal merchandise, Lisa Keogh, Teresa Bryan, I'm a Life by Isabel Anderson, Now for the North by Anna Leckie, Amanda Coogan, Tara Flynn, and the Artist Campaign to Repeal the 8. So some of these artists were already fully embedded in the pro-choice community, and some were kind of acting in parallel or alongside. And we tend to forget that work within the art community is also effective and can also reach people who will then reach many others, kind of what Naomi was saying earlier, that artists alone can't change the world, but then neither can anyone else alone. The Power describes the goal of activist artists as a combination of theoretical and practical social engagement and action. So using fine art practices, multimedia, embracing an expansive approach, and rather than a finessing one. Most projects embrace an ethos of participatory production, or collaboration. So it's about a facilitation of a dialogue and an authenticity in the reflection of the affected people, as well as the power of the collective voice and disrupting norms. The projects I'm talking about all generated some sort of empathy and an evocation of a lived experience and an intention to have this dialogical space. For the work produced alongside Alliance for Choice, there's an art theorist called Grant Kester who talks a lot about this kind of empathetic and dialogical co-production, and he says that it functions alongside or within activist practice. And the PARD has a definition that I come back to all the time about what activist art is or could or should strive to be, which is the feminist and socialist value system insists on cultural workers supporting and responding to their constituencies. 3 models of such interaction are group and public ritual, public consciousness raising and interaction through visual images, environments and performances, and cooperative, collaborative, collective or anonymous art making. And amazingly, I think without always necessarily fully intending to do so, I think Array have managed to hit all of these in the last couple of projects. So art activism seems to work best when it can effect an emotionally resonant response, like Nicola was saying, which can shift paradigms and culture. Therefore, there's a range engaged with by Alliance for Choice in tandem with our core activist practices, and these have ensured that the intentions that we have with the works honour the people most deeply impacted. Array and Alliance for Choice's efforts towards transformation and empowerment through artistic engagement demonstrate the potential shift in attitudes and behaviours when community voices are combined with the activist artist voice and experienced in a way that embraces both the method and the narrative subject. Schmidt, Campbell and Martin and Azoulay explained this expression of citizenship through visual activist art practice. So they position cultural production about rights and purpose as the embodiment of good citizenship, or upholding the public side of the civil contract. I have a whole other thing about the civil contract in photography because of Azoulay, but it's the idea that in areas of rights where people have been denied or their have been abandoned by the state or have been denied this kind of true social contract, that there are other ways we can make our own civil contracts through art and through community expression. So for visual arts in Ireland, there have been really very little directly on the topic between 1994 and the 2000s. There was Pauline Cummins and Louise Walsh and Sheila Honan, who were notable and brave exceptions at a time when the country had recently witnessed a referendum fall in favour of a continued ban on abortion access. So often artworks about abortion in Ireland have played with themes of secrecy, silence, safety, solace and sensuality, and I didn't realise until I read it out how many S's there were there. Like the photographs and film at the core of the work produced in when they put their hands out like scales, 2 of the images which are there. As a member of Alliance for Choice and as an artist would exemplify this strain of invisibility versus visibility. So it's this acknowledgement of something that's happening without denouement or without like revealing who is going through this. It's an every person or an every abortion seeker idea that you're in the first person position of going through this journey with the artist. I don't have time to go into all the works in any great detail, but it was originally shown, this previous one, in Copperhouse Gallery, which is the first time they'd ever hosted anything about abortion and the first time there had been an exhibition about abortion in a couple of decades in Ireland. They had a few accompanying events co-facilitated and organised by Siobhan Clancy, I mentioned earlier, who's also an artist and at that time was a steering group member of the Abortion Rights Campaign. Siobhan, who's since become a long-time collaborator, was eager to ensure that Alliance for Choice in Belfast had a say in what became the Repeal the 8th campaign in Ireland. This meant not only did we become an official member of the Abortion Rights Steering Group, but also that the importance of art as an activist tool was a core thread of their central strategy. So namely, they had a creative and direct action subgroup, which we were both involved in. Here are some creative and direct actions from Array. So if both Kester and Lepard that I've mentioned earlier have aspirations for this effective dialogue and using activist art to consider as some sort of enriched emancipation and civil participation, in many ways the content of the work itself really ought to offer something to the community it's working from within or on behalf of, as well as the spaces of participation acting as sites of empathy, engagement, and also, importantly, transformative knowledge. An appropriate hobby, so here are the many different forms that it has taken over time, was a kind of longitudinal work that began as part of a residency in Array Studios, and it was a mixed media project that spanned 4 years and 2 seismic changes for abortion on the island of Ireland. It was imagined by me as a way of addressing the invisibility of women and potentially pregnant people in the narrative around abortion in Ireland. When Pam mentioned earlier the fetus, quite often it's like hovering in space in this kind of, I don't know, cosmic fluid without a woman present, or it's just like this kind of disembodied belly that it inhabits. So it was trying to address this kind of invisibility, and even though the first project, the kind of first person narrative hinted at a person needing an abortion who was travelling, there were no visible people there at the time due to a certain amount of caution or even kind of probably stigma. So I was also trying to exemplify that there is an expansive and diverse movement that have been responsible for the shift in the public discourse and ultimately the laws on access. So everyone in every one of these pictures is or has been or did do some sort of abortion rights activism, and the pictures that they're layered with was about the type of activism that they did, or they would send me pictures of where they'd been involved in protests or something that reminded them of why they were involved in abortion rights activism, and I would kind of symmetricalize it and turn them into pro-choice butterflies. It was trying to capture so not only the struggle for reproductive rights but honour the movement. Importantly, like the other projects, this work couldn't be imagined or realised as a lone artist. Activism, organising and movement building are inherently group projects, and also I would argue that art production is always a group project. So it's typically developed in collaboration with others, and it reflects a democratic paradigm, eliciting multiple viewpoints that challenge dominant discourse. In the 21st century, public space can span urban and digital realms, or both concurrently, but importantly it endeavours to galvanise citizen dissent towards social change. An appropriate hobby tries to acknowledge the power of collective action and the power to destabilise stigma with visibility. It reflects a digital world of activism more readily than many of the other projects, and reflects something of the nature of solidarity that was to be a key strength in the Irish movement towards reproductive liberty. As Butler acknowledged in 2015 in her notes on performative assembly, city streets are no longer the only option for people to assemble. Now we have online social networking producing effective solidarity in the audiovisual domain. You can see here as well where some of the butterflies actually ended up as campaign tiles for post-decriminalisation. Abortion is a really key area of where the state abandons women and pregnant people. And this abandonment didn't cease when we had our belated entry into the body politic, but it forced us to develop practices, norms and skills of our own for the governing and caring of our abandoned bodies. As demonstrably happened in underground abortion services on the island of Ireland, which Anne Rossiter again can tell us a lot about, where Alliance for Choice were also a key part of that underground network. And here we can see the ultimate state abandonment when people like Savita were abandoned to die instead of having access to abortion. As others see us, was Array's 2019 installation in London's Jerwood exhibition Collaborate. It centred in 3 fictional characters drawn from pre-Christian myths and folklore of ancient Ireland: the Sacred Cow, the Long Shadow, and pictured here, the Morrigan. Array produced 3 films, as well as an in-situ archive, character banners, Irish language translations, and documents which drew on the experience of Irish diaspora in England and North Irish identity, as well as LGBTQ rights in Northern Ireland and women and reproductive rights. The Morrigan character was imagined, or is understood already, as a virgin youth, a pregnant woman, and an old crone. And like her mythological inspiration, our version of the character shape-shifted from one to the other with increasingly animalistic and grotesque features, finally dragging herself to the walls of the Westminster buildings, weeping and begging for recognition of equitable reproductive rights. Audiences in London experienced a film of the Morrigan, as well as the archive section, which included activist ephemera and historical archives of the abortion rights movement in Northern Ireland. So the presentation of this work, this is the installation images from the Jerwood show in 2019. And the presentation of this work in a White Cube gallery space was a tricky negotiation of what Array had already done with organisations like Alliance for Choice, at protests, workshops, and as volunteers. And there can sometimes be a danger of activist art, if it's too far removed from its context, becoming fetishised or objectified, which then kind of doubles its othering, which is completely undesirable for whoever you're trying to represent and the artists involved. I think we did manage to avoid it with the archives, but what was also different for the first time for Array in the Collaborate project was this was for an English art audience. We assumed them to be supportive of LGBT rights and of abortion. However, this was an invitation to engage with the cause and effect of colonialism in Ireland that had contributed to the contemporary lack of social progress. It asked them to end the ignorance towards Northern Ireland and its complexities. Not only did it ask for empathy, but it required an acknowledgement of British state abandonment and the othering of Northern Ireland and its people, even as they travelled every day to access rights, jobs, and healthcare. Array's work fully embraces this kind of empathetic participation that Kester talks about and the earlier Lepard models of an art activist practice. It's like an enriched, I guess, participation of socially engaged art. And Butler, that I talked about earlier, as well as public assembly online and in the streets, she talks about an attentive interdependence. So this idea that you're calling attention to the fact that we're all connected and we all rely on each other, which then demands for a more livable life. So we pivoted this approach a little bit for the Turner Prize exhibition of the Druids Ball and tried to ensure a truer reflection of the activist and, let's be honest, chaotic elements of our practice. Again, like at the Jerwood, abortion was only one of many of the parts of the installation, but the decision to include real protest ephemera made and used by both Array and Alliance for Choice aimed to try and reflect the ambience and emotion of being part of a rally for rights or a call to resistance. And that's Maeve, who sung like an Irish abandonment song, and also in the original event had a song about I'm trying to remember what it was called, the Lonio, which is really heartbreaking. And then beside her is an image, an illustration of the Slapper character. In the film of the Druids Ball event in Belfast, the Slapper character took centre stage with the footage of the Morrigan, as we discussed earlier, in her London pilgrimage projected onto her long white banshee hair. She's described as, look back so you can see her. Born of the ancient Morrigan and inspired by Bernadette Devlin McCalskey, the Slapper subverts power, trying to bring us all back to care through justice and self-determination. McCalskey, who famously slapped the British Home Secretary after he lied about Bloody Sunday straight after the tragedy, continues her social justice work today, including abortion rights, migrant and refugee rights, and solidarity across race and class. Our Slapper's exuberant resistance continues as she knows how far we have not come. Her 60s garb is inspired by the rubber hands of domesticity and hidden free labour, as well as the rubber bullets of British state troops in Northern Ireland from 1970. The speech of Bernadette's, which was a much more recent affair, was projected from the Belfast Rally for Choice, and for many in the room on the night of the ball was deeply moving, as decriminalisation in 2019 is still a raw and recent memory. Often, we need art to offer us a valve and even a salve for the heightened vulnerabilities of activism. I can't possibly cover all artistic and creative projects undertaken by Alliance for Choice, or all activist projects undertaken by Array, but I'm hoping that this kind of brings us to understand a little taster of what visual arts practice can bring to social movements. For me, it's clear that art offers active engagement, education, change, and even movement building for Alliance for Choice in Northern Ireland and beyond. Art can spark interest in ways that court hearings and policy documents cannot, as we mentioned earlier, and art aims to revisit narratives in less didactic ways. Each of these projects offered a form of collaboration or participation in a way that was trying to generate dialogue as opposed to diatribe. Array and Alliance for Choice's art often allows breathing room for complexity and acknowledgement rather than political purism, and occasionally offered some light in a long dark tunnel. So there's the rules of Array. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emma. I hope, like me, everyone has written down that line, that art as a valve and also sometimes a salve. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's incredible, and it kind of sums up much of what we're trying to present today. We're going to open up to yourselves now for questions and for comments. If you're more comfortable typing the question into the chat box, please feel free to do so. We can read it out. And if you're happy to do so, if you just raise your hand physically, and we'll unmute you in order to make your contribution. So over to you all. Anyone want to go first? Fiona.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
I just wanted to reflect on Nicola's work on the animations. I mean, they're so beautiful. The tone is so calm and engaging. You know, I mean, the imagery is just gorgeous. And I was, very tangentially involved in the Faith one, which largely was me replying to emails, yes, this looks fabulous. And Emma and Kelly really working closely with Nicola on it. And I think just they capture just this beautiful moment, particularly the Faith project is such a new avenue of work, and it's very high risk, and the individuals involved in that project, many of them can't go public about what they're doing, so this was a lovely way for their voice to be heard, so I just wanted to say awesome, just awesome work.
I think, round of applause for Nicola.
Yeah.
And I think we'll have to acknowledge as well, when the billboards were damaged, it wasn't an easy place for Nicola to be, but you've articulated very well, Nicola, the importance of that, and the importance of breaking down barriers. And sometimes it can be hard to do, and it can be hard to maintain. I think it was quite a baptism of fire, Nicola. Yeah, it was. Do you want to make any comment on that?
No, it was really scary just as an illustrator, because I do other work. It was kind of like, what impact would that have? But also I did want to stick by my views, so it was like that torn in between, but I think I don't want to work for clients that don't have the same views as me. So yeah, that's why I made the decision overall.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Or
Can't believe Anne's being so quiet.
okay, there's just one in the chat box. Okay, that's
been a long road. It's been a long road.
It has, Anne.
And I remember in the downstairs when I was doing making a holy show of myself, the first venture I think into performance. I don't think I could grace it with that title, but it became absolutely clear that it wasn't possible to go move the thing forward just with the traditional type of protest that we were doing. It was just getting tired and the activists weren't turning up. So you were, I remember in that gallery, what's the name of it again, with your first photographs? You mentioned,
in Dublin, in Copper House.
Yes, the Copper House. That was a revelation to me, Emma. I mean, you arrived from Canada, I think. And suddenly I met you and I thought, oh my God, here's someone bringing a new wind in, and you did. Look at it now. It's extraordinary what has happened. And those animations are just amazing. Just to say briefly that there in the South Bank, there's a University of the Arts. Sorry, I have a bad throat and I can't talk much. And somebody made an animation of my arm reaching out to the women coming, and I nearly fell about. It was just so beautiful. It was just an arm, but it spoke, you know. And the things that you're doing now, oh my God. The Nicola, your stuff is just mind-blowing. Do you mind me saying that?
Thank you.
It's really mind-blowing. It's amazing. I'll be thinking of it all next week, because these are things that have taken so long, and finally it's come to fruition. These things make an impact, particularly on young people. You shouldn't be focusing on the 80-year-olds like me anymore. I'm out, but still struggling. But young ones, they immediately, are attracted to that. Amazing. And Emma, your PhD, my God. Yes, I won't say another word, mind-blowing, etc. And where's the book, Fiona Bloomer? Where's the bloody book? Is it coming?
The bloody book is with the publishers.
Oh, God. You want me to go down there and protest outside and say, what in the hell's the hold up? Give it to us and we'll edit it for you.
Yeah, we're waiting on feedback on that. I mean, I'm hoping springtime it'll be published and we can have a fabulous launch event.
Absolutely. You know? And COVID or no COVID, I'm going over.
Yeah.
I'm not going at the moment. 4 people are down with it that I know, and 1 has died. And so sorry to be remote, but I can't afford it. It's inconvenient to die this year. Next year will be better.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Anne. And I don't have to disagree with one thing you said. I don't think you're going anywhere anytime soon at all.
Don't.
Absolutely not.
I went out last week and nearly lost my life. Everyone's walking around without a mask. They are bumping into you and everything, you know. Anyway.
We'll send them some Alliance for Choice masks. Just there's a comment just from someone in the chat box, just a contribution. and they've said it's really beautiful to get a glimpse of how reproductive justice activism in Northern Ireland has been so centred around art and artistic practices.
Absolutely.
It's amazing to see how there are such particular and local, tactics, and that's someone who comes from the Netherlands. I think it's really important that they've highlighted that what we're working towards is not just rights, but reproductive justice as well. And that's, I think that the justice aspect is something that Alliance for Choice have really, really tried to grasp and move towards over the past couple of years. And I read this recently where someone said that justice is what love looks like in public. And I think that that's really powerful and actually quite simplistic. But I think that art enables us to sort of express that love in a much more colourful way and a much more detailed way. It allows, for the diversity, and it brings all of those things in, the detail of the story, all the narratives. So I'm really glad that someone has sort of picked up on the justice aspect, and of course, the intersectionality, which is at the core of it all. So I'm really glad that someone's made that contribution.
Could I say something on that? And I promise I won't say another word.
We wouldn't dare stop you, Anne. Go ahead.
That it's really important because intersectionality is very shaky. I have lost my faith in it a lot of the time, and the demotion of the situation in Northern Ireland, I don't know. I mean, I don't even tell you people because I feel you'll be just depressed with the responses we get here, I could be coming from Honolulu or something. Northern Ireland is that far away in people's minds. And what is more, a gross indifference in the main, amazing exceptions, but putting forward artistic endeavors does create an other kind of consciousness. That's definite. People are attracted to that. They're not attracted to writings, but they're attracted to art. And this is extraordinary. And people were attracted here to Imelda, Alan making England the legal destination for abortion. These were performance art films, well, at least we thought they were art anyway. We tried. You got more people asking questions, but generally Northern Ireland is a place apart still, I'm afraid. Sorry to tell you that on a Thursday.
I'm just going to hand over to Emma just for a few maybe closing comments, and then we'll do a quick round robin in case anybody has any sort of burning questions before we finish.
Well, thanks everybody for sticking around, and just in case people don't know, I mean, I don't know how you couldn't, but in case you don't know who Anne Rossiter is, Anne has been involved in supporting people accessing abortion from Ireland, North and South since the late 60s. Is that right?
I think on and off in the 60s, but definitely from the 70s.
Yeah. Yes. So, Anne, Anne won't let me, but I want to do a project about Anne, but I still have all those recordings, and someday.
Well, I'll be after you, especially if I'm going next year. I want to finish off.
Yeah, we really appreciate everyone coming, and if you are able to come to Coventry to see the Turner Prize show, we in Array would absolutely welcome everyone to take some time into the shebeen, and make sure that you have your recorders or iPlayer, whatever, ready for the 1st of December at 7 p.m. when the awards ceremony is happening. Obviously everyone's a winner, but it'd be nice for some abortion rights and Northern Ireland support. We're going to send out a discount code for this merchandise for everyone that attended the talk today. so that you can get a little bit of money off. There's jumpers, t-shirts and bags. And really just thanks for still being interested in abortion in Northern Ireland and supporting us all. Thank you to Pam for coming and telling us all about the Lady of Guadalupe and more. And thank you so much to Nicola, who was so worried about public speaking, but I think did absolutely brilliantly. And the animations just stand up to viewing time and again, I think. And obviously thanks to Naomi, because there's no way you could ever do what we do on our own. And you can't see Alice from the Harbour, but she's behind the screen over here, trying not to get involved in the microphone. But thanks for all the support from the Herbert, for hosting us and for letting us kind of do whatever we wanted with our programming. So thanks everyone, and have a good afternoon.